All right, so today's instructional model video will focus on the skill of writing an effective and sophisticated analytical paragraph. Again, we're using the 2017 free response question number two. This is Claire Booth Luce's 1960 speech to the Women's National Press Club. Um, so writing an analytical paragraph is important because it's literally the entire focus of writing a rhetorical analysis essay. You begin with an analytical claim, which you're analyzing the rhetorical choices made to affect some type of change in the audience. And that analytical paragraph develops that claim and develops how that choice, number one, impacts the audience, and two, leads to some type of change within the audience. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is look at the success criteria for writing a sophisticated analytical paragraph. You want to begin with an analytical claim that describes a rhetorical choice the speaker makes, describes the intended impact of the choice on the audience, and connects the choice to the speaker's purpose. Look at yesterday's video for a detailed model video on writing an analytical claim. Uh, Analytical paragraph should also embed sufficient textual evidence that supports the analytical claim. I'm going to pause there and answer like a frequently asked question of how much evidence do you need or how many quotes? The answer is really however much evidence helps to support that claim. All right, you could use two quotes, you could use one extended quote. However much evidence like fully supports that claim that you made in that first sentence, that's how much evidence you should use. Next, you want to feature that paragraph should feature sufficient commentary that both explains how the choice demonstrates an understanding of the audience's beliefs, values, and needs, and also explains how the choice ultimately helps the speaker achieve his or her overall purpose. All right, that's your commentary. You need to do both of those, not just one, but both. So for sophistication, if you're trying to get that sophistication point, explain the significance or relevance of the writer's rhetorical choices, given the rhetorical situation, and explain a purpose or function of the passage's complexities or tensions. You'll see in my exemplar, I'm going to attempt to um, do one or both of those in order to get that sophistication point. All right. So, yeah, going back to the analytical, well, let's stamp that rhetorical situation one more time. So again, we're looking at the Claire Booth Luce's speech to the Women's National Press Club. Obviously, our speaker is Claire Booth Luce. All right, American journalist and politician Claire Booth Luce. She's speaking to journalists at the Women's National Press Club, fellow journalists. Um, We know that this is a opening to a speech made in 1960. We know that eventually in this speech she goes on to criticize her audience right now. But right now, um, the whole purpose of the speech is she's motivated by the tendency of the American press to sacrifice journalistic integrity in favor of the perceived public demand for sensationalist stories. Right, and overall, her purpose in just this opening is to use this introduction to prepare the audience for her particular message. All right, so that's our rhetorical situation, and we're going to develop this analytical claim. The analytical claim that I showed you yesterday for paragraph one, we're going to further develop that to analyze how that rhetorical choice impacts the audience and helps her to support her overall message and purpose. All right. So again, we're looking at paragraph one here. All right. So we said that in the first paragraph, lines 1 through 10 of her opening, Luce awkwardly acknowledges the difficulty of her position as a journalist, asked by her fellow journalists to, quote, throw rocks at them, unquote, in order to earn the trust of her peers and eventually set them up for eventual criticism. So the first thing we did to do that was zoom in on the rhetorical choice. So we're zooming in on that rhetorical choice. All right. We got to also think about who is our audience and what traits or beliefs are relevant about the audience and their reception to the message. All right. We know that we're dealing with journalists at the Women's National Press Club. These are her peers. All right. We also know that they probably would not be receptive to having somebody in their face criticize them for what they're doing wrong. Right. Like this is some almighty person. Even if they respect her as a speaker, they would not take kindly to being criticized to their face. Right. We need to make the connection. Like, what is the most likely way that this strategy will impact the audience? All right. So again, we know that she's acknowledging how difficult it is for her to stand in front of her audience and criticize them. We know how difficult it would be for the audience to sit there and be criticized. So by her acknowledging how difficult that position is, she's also acknowledging to them that she doesn't really want to criticize them, right? But they invited her to do it. So she's just really fulfilling her responsibility. So this should build some level of trust and credibility with the audience. And ultimately, when we return to that purpose, it should help prepare the audience for the criticism that's coming later on in the speech, right? If you need to pause and kind of rewind and catch all that, go ahead. But the first thing I did was zoom in on the rhetorical choice by describing or characterizing it. The second thing I did was think about and what do I know about the audience? What traits or beliefs are relevant about the audience and their reception to that message that she's putting forth? Third, I'm making a connection. Like, what is the most likely way the strategy will impact the audience? And then the last thing is always return back to the purpose because ultimately she's trying to affect some level of change within the audience. So come back to that audience. All right, come back to the purpose. How does this accomplish the change the writer wants to inspire in their audience? All right. So ultimately, by this should prepare the audience for the criticism that she's going to later on provide in the speech. All right. So also for our sophistication, we want to think about like what is the significance or relevance of the writer's rhetorical choice given the rhetorical situation, and or explain a purpose or function of the passage's complexities or tensions. The main tension here is that Claire Booth Luce is a peer of her audience, and she's been invited there to specifically criticize them for what they're doing wrong and for sacrificing their journalistic integrity. That's pretty big. Um, that's a pretty big criticism to levy at people that you respect, right? So that's by itself is a very complex, intense task that she's been put forth to do, but she's doing it. All right. So, all right. So, using all those thinking steps, this is what this analytical paragraph comes to. We have the same claim here in blue. We have evidence in orange, commentary in green, more evidence here in orange, and lastly, more commentary in green. I want you to see how I kind of structured this paragraph. I structured it in the same way I kind of tell you after every piece of evidence requires some type of commentary. All right. So after the first piece of evidence, I provide commentary about basically the audience. Like how does that choice demonstrate an understanding of the audience's beliefs, values, or needs? And then I come back with some more evidence about the last few lines in the paragraph. And then my last piece of commentary kind of wraps up the entire claim and discusses how that choice accomplishes the change that the writer wants to inspire, which is to prepare them for criticism later on in the speech. All right, so follow along knowing that ahead of time. So I'll read the entire paragraph. In the first paragraph, lines 1 through 10 of her opening, Luce awkwardly acknowledges the difficulty of her position as a journalist, asked by her fellow journalists to, quote, throw rocks at them, unquote, in order to earn the trust of her peers and eventually set them up for eventual criticism. In lines 1 through 6, Luce asserts how happy and flattered she is to be a, quote, guest of honor at the Women's National Press Club, but that she is also, quote, less happy and, quote, more challenged due to the fact that she has been invited by the press to tell the press what is wrong with them. At the beginning of the speech, Luce clearly feels the weight of the daunting task before her, not just as a journalist, but someone who reveres the American press, but must put aside the pedestal she has placed the press on and engage in needed truth telling. She knows her audience of female journalists wouldn't normally take well to in person criticism, so Luce, ever the politician, emphasizes to the crowd that it was their own choice to invite Luce to throw rocks at them, using her status as renowned peer of theirs to build credibility for her message. Luce, in lines 7 through 10, speaks of the great national significance and infinite possibilities that could come about from the welcoming of her message, though it also cause infinite perils to the messenger, Luce herself. Ultimately, the first paragraph of Luce's opening allows the audience to see the speaker as an essential and sympathetic figure, which will eventually soften the blow of her oncoming criticism later in the speech. Basically, Luce begins with love. You know how when I criticize the entire class, I start with love. Here's what y'all are doing well. Here's why I love y'all so much. Ultimately, this is why y'all are messing up. All right. Luce takes that same strategy and applies that throughout this entire opening. All right. So as if as you're writing an analytical paragraph, first thing, zoom in on the rhetorical choice. All right. Describe how can you describe what's actually happening um, in that particular excerpt that you are analyzing. Know the audience. All right. Really think about who is the audience, how might they feel being there and hearing or reading that rhetoric. All right. Um, how would they receive that message, whatever that message might be, and make the connection. Like, what is the likely way that that rhetorical choice or strategy will impact the audience? What does the writer know about the audience to know that, hey, this strategy will be successful because specifically who the audience is? And then come back to the purpose. How does this ultimately help the writer or the speaker inspire the change that they want to see in their audience, either through a change of action or change of mindset? How does that strategy ultimately help get them to that goal? All right. And then again, for sophistication, think about what is the tension here. All right. Address the tension because the speaker knows the tension, the audience knows the tension. It's your job as writers, as analyzers, to see and really call out that tension that's present there. The tension here is clear. She's a peer, she's a fellow journalist, she reveres the people that she's about to criticize, and she has to acknowledge that. And it shows like there's a very awkwardness to this first paragraph. All right. So again, your job is to use this to write an analytical paragraph for either the second or third paragraph. For those of you that completed the practice question yesterday, use the same rhetorical choice that you used there and just continue to develop it out into a full paragraph. All right. Any questions, leave those in the comments or, you know, respond to me directly, contact me directly, and I'll be happy as always to answer those and walk you through it. If you need to set up a face-to-face Zoom meeting, get in touch with me and we can set that up. All right. So this has been your model for writing an sophisticated analytical paragraph. Take this and be great. Out.